His lawyer's face went white, not pale, not flushed, white, like someone had reached inside John Spencer and drained every drop of blood right out of him. Spencer was the most expensive divorce attorney in Connecticut, the man who never lost, the man whose hourly rate could cover a month's rent in most apartments, the man whose name alone made opposing counsel consider early settlement. And there he stood, hands trembling, flipping through documents he clearly did not expect to see. His fingers kept slipping on the pages. He had to start over twice. Scott Rice sat next to him, and the confident smirk that had been plastered across his face for the past 8 weeks melted away like ice cream on a hot sidewalk. Pure terror replaced it, the kind of terror that comes when you realize the game you thought you were winning was never the game being played. Across the courtroom, Layla Harrison remained perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her breathing steady. The wedding ring she still wore out of habit suddenly felt lighter than it had in months. She had stopped wearing it because she loved him somewhere around week 3. She kept wearing it because she knew this moment was coming. The man who told her to get out of his house, the man who called their daughter disgusting names in front of her, the man who removed his own child from health insurance like she was a subscription service he no longer needed, the man who thought he was about to take everything from her. He finally understood. He had already lost. But this satisfying ending needed context, and context in this case meant going back 8 weeks to the night Layla Harrison's world collapsed around her, or at least the night she thought it did, before she remembered who she was, before she remembered what she was capable of. Her name was Layla Harrison. She was 34 years old, and for 10 years she believed she had a good marriage, not perfect, but good. She was a forensic accountant before she became a mom. A really good one, actually. She found hidden money for a living. She uncovered fraud schemes that executives thought were bulletproof. She testified in federal court 3 times before she turned 30. But when her daughter Jennifer was 2 years old and got diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, Scott convinced her to stay home. Jennifer needed her, he said. He made enough money for both of them, he said. She could always go back to work later, he said. So she gave up her career to raise their child and support his dreams.
Funny how that works out sometimes. Scott Rice wasn't always the man he became. When Layla first met him at a charity fundraiser in Boston, he was charming in a way that felt earned, not performed. He remembered details, her favorite flower, peonies, the way she took her coffee, black with 1 sugar, the name of her childhood dog, Patches. He made her feel seen in a world where she'd spent years feeling invisible behind spreadsheets and audit reports. He was ambitious, yes, driven, but he directed that ambition toward building something together, a life, a family, a future. Their first date lasted 7 hours. Coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into a walk by the harbor. The walk turned into dinner. By the time he drove her home, Layla knew she was in trouble, the good kind of trouble. The first 3 years were good, really good. Scott's commercial real estate development company, Ridgeline Properties, was growing. Layla's forensic accounting career was thriving. They bought a beautiful colonial Dutch in Stamford, Connecticut, using the inheritance her grandmother had left her, $160,000 as the down payment. Scott handled the closing paperwork because Layla was 7 months pregnant and on bed rest with complications. She signed where he told her to sign. She trusted him completely. What a naive thing she was back then. When Jennifer was diagnosed at 2 years old, everything changed. Cystic fibrosis required constant attention, treatments, medications, hospital visits that could last for days. Scott sat Layla down one evening and made his case with the same persuasive confidence he used to close real estate deals. Jennifer needed stability, he said, a parent at home full-time. His income was more than enough to support them, and Layla could always go back to work later, when Jennifer was older, when things were more manageable. She agreed, not because she wanted to leave her career, but because she loved her daughter more than she loved anything else in the world, more than her job, more than her independence, more than the part of herself that had spent years building expertise that now sat unused. 6 years passed. Jennifer grew into a bright, curious 9-year-old who loved purple and silver stars and asked too many questions about everything. She had her father's eyes and her mother's stubbornness. Her breathing treatments became routine, her medications became background noise, her hospital visits became less frequent. Layla kept her professional certifications current through online courses during nap times and quiet evenings. She told herself it was just in case she ever wanted to work again, just in case things changed.
Some part of her always knew this day might come. That Tuesday evening started like any other. Layla was making dinner, chicken piccata, Scott's favorite. Jennifer was doing homework at the kitchen table, her slight wheeze a constant background rhythm that Layla had learned to monitor without thinking. And Scott came home early. That should have been her first warning sign. Scott never came home early, not for birthdays, not for anniversaries, not for Jennifer's school plays. His schedule was sacred, his time was valuable. His presence at home before 7 o'clock was roughly as common as a solar eclipse. But there he was, loosening his tie, sitting down at the table across from their daughter, and calmly announcing that he had filed for divorce. Just like that, like he was telling her he'd picked up dry cleaning, like he was mentioning that the car needed an oil change, like their 10 years together could be dismissed in the same breath as a grocery list. But then he kept talking, and every word hit like a punch to the stomach. He wanted everything: the house, the cars, the investment accounts, the retirement funds. He had already hired John Spencer, the best, the most expensive, the most ruthless, and she should just accept that she was going to lose. Then he looked at Jennifer, their 9-year-old baby girl who was sitting right there, listening to every word, her pencil frozen above her math worksheet. And he said something that would echo in Layla's mind for months. He didn't need her or his stinky, sick daughter. He actually called her that, stinky, sick, like she was garbage to throw away, like the child he had helped create was a defect he was finally returning to the manufacturer. Jennifer's pencil clattered to the table. Her face crumpled. The sound that came out of her wasn't quite a cry. It was smaller than that, more wounded, like something had broken inside her that she didn't have words for yet. And Layla held her while her entire world collapsed around them. Scott just sat there looking annoyed, like their pain was an inconvenience to his schedule, like their tears were making him late for something more important. The doorbell rang. Of course it did, because when your life falls apart, there's always someone waiting to make it worse. Susan Rice walked in without waiting for anyone to answer. She had a key, naturally. Susan had boundary issues the way the ocean had water issues. She had been letting herself into their home for 10 years, commenting on the dust, rearranging the pillows, suggesting that Layla really should try harder. She swept into the kitchen like she owned the place, which she apparently now believes she did, and immediately started measuring the windows, actually measuring them. She had a little tape measure in her designer purse, and she was checking dimensions for new curtains while her granddaughter sobbed 10 feet away. Susan had never liked Layla. From the day Scott introduced them, she made it clear Layla wasn't good enough for her precious boy. Wrong family, wrong college, wrong pedigree, wrong everything. For 10 years, she'd dropped little comments about Layla's cooking, too bland, too spicy, too ambitious, not ambitious enough, about her housekeeping, a smudge on the window, dust on the mantel, a throw pillow slightly askew, about her parenting, too protective, not protective enough, spoiling Jennifer, neglecting Jennifer. Now she was triumphant. She told Scott she was so proud of him for finally making the right decision. She said she always knew Layla was just after his money. The irony of that statement would become devastatingly clear later. Scott gave Layla 48 hours to pack her things and leave his house, the house she had lived in for 8 years, the house where she raised their daughter, the house where she celebrated birthdays and holidays and quiet Sunday mornings, the house she had paid for with her grandmother's inheritance. 2 days to erase a decade, but that decision would cost him everything. Layla didn't sleep that night. She sat in Jennifer's room watching her daughter breathe, listening to the slight wheeze that never quite went away, and tried to figure out how her life had fallen apart so completely. She thought about all the signs she must have missed, the late nights at the office that had become more frequent over the past year, the business trips that seemed to happen every other week, the way Scott looked at his phone and smiled at messages she never saw, the way he started showering as soon as he got home, before even saying hello. She had been so focused on being a good mother that she forgot to notice she was becoming an invisible wife. The next morning, while packing boxes in her bedroom like a guest who had overstayed her welcome, she found something. A bank statement that had fallen behind Scott's nightstand, probably months ago. She almost threw it away with the dust bunnies, but old habits die hard. And when you spend years analyzing financial documents, you can't help but look at numbers. Numbers tell stories. Numbers reveal patterns. Numbers don't lie, even when people do.
Something was wrong. The account balance showed $47,000, but Layla knew roughly what Scott earned. She had done his taxes for the first 5 years of their marriage. She knew their monthly expenses. She knew what their savings should look like. The math didn't work. There should have been at least $150,000 in that account, maybe more. Where was the rest of their money? She tucked that statement into her purse. At the time, she didn't know why. Maybe instinct, maybe hope, maybe just the forensic accountant in her refusing to let a discrepancy slide. That part of her had been sleeping for 6 years, but it wasn't dead. It was just waiting. She didn't know it yet, but that crumpled piece of paper would change everything. Scott stood by the door as she loaded the last boxes into her car. Jennifer was already buckled in the back seat, clutching her stuffed elephant named Trumpet and looking confused about why they were leaving their home. Scott didn't hug her goodbye. He didn't even look at her. He just checked his watch, a Rolex that Layla had given him for their 5th anniversary, like they were making him late for something more important. Probably a golf game or his girlfriend, though Layla didn't know about her yet. She drove away from the house she had paid for, the life she had built, and the man she thought she knew. Her daughter asked when they were coming back home. Layla didn't have an answer, but she had that bank statement, and she had 10 years of professional training that Scott had apparently forgotten about. Scott wasn't satisfied with just ending her marriage. He wanted to destroy her completely. Within days, their mutual friends stopped returning Layla's calls, people she had known for years, women she had helped through their own difficult times, couples they had vacationed with. Silence, voicemails that went unreturned, text messages that showed as read but never got responses. One of them finally admitted why. Rachel Winthrop, who Layla had considered her closest friend, agreed to meet her for coffee. She looked uncomfortable from the moment she sat down, kept glancing at the door like she expected someone to walk in and catch her. Scott had been telling everyone Layla was mentally unstable, Rachel said, that she had substance abuse problems, that she had been hiding a drinking problem for years, that she might be an unfit mother, that he was worried, genuinely worried, about Jennifer's safety. 10 years of being a devoted wife and mom, and suddenly she was the villain of her own story. Layla found out later he had been building this narrative for months, maybe longer. Little comments at dinner parties. "Have you noticed Layla seems tired lately?" Concerned whispers to neighbors. "She's been under so much stress and worried about her." Careful seeds planted in fertile ground. He was laying the groundwork for his perfect divorce before she even knew there was a problem. The man should have been a novelist instead of a real estate developer with that kind of creative fiction skills. But the worst part came in the mail. An explanation of benefits from their health insurance company. The envelope looked routine, the kind of thing you file away without really reading, but something made Layla open it. Something made her look at the date. 3 weeks before Scott even filed for divorce. The letter informed her that Jennifer was no longer covered under Scott's policy. He had removed her from his insurance. His own daughter, a child who needed regular treatments for cystic fibrosis, who required medication every single day, who depended on specialist visits and respiratory therapy and a careful management plan that had taken years to develop. He had removed her like she was an optional rider on a car insurance policy, like she was a subscription service he no longer needed. The first pharmacy bill arrived at their tiny rental apartment in Norwalk a few days later. Layla stared at the number and her stomach dropped. $2,340 for one prescription, 1 month's supply, more than their monthly rent. She did the math automatically. It was what her brain did. Jennifer's medications alone would cost over $6,000 a month without insurance, plus the breathing treatments, plus the specialist visits, plus the hospitalizations that happened 2 or 3 times a year. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about her daughter's health, her daughter's life. Scott was using their child as a weapon, and he didn't even have the decency to care if she got hurt in the crossfire. That's when something shifted inside Layla. Fear started turning into something else, something sharper, something that had been dormant for 6 years, but never truly gone.
She met with a divorce attorney that week. A nice woman named Helen Braddock with a cluttered office and sympathetic eyes. The kind of lawyer who actually listened, who took notes, who seemed to genuinely care. Helen looked at Layla's case, looked at Scott's financial declarations, looked at the name of his attorney, John Spencer. She actually sighed out loud, the kind of sigh that carries years of exhaustion in it. She told Layla she should probably just take whatever settlement he offered. Fighting John Spencer was like fighting a tsunami with an umbrella. The man had resources, connections, a reputation that preceded him into every courtroom. Judges knew him, respected him, sometimes feared him. Great, very encouraging. Layla asked how much Spencer charged per hour. The answer made her calculate that just sneezing in that man's presence probably cost about $500. But Helen gave her what she was legally entitled to, the process for requesting financial documents, the timeline for discovery, the forms she would need to file. Knowledge is power, and Layla was starting to remember just how much she knew about finding things people wanted to keep hidden. A few days later, she had to go to Scott's office. During divorce proceedings, both parties have the legal right to request financial documents. She needed copies of tax returns, business statements, bank records. Scott's secretary helped her gather what she was entitled to see. A quiet woman named Ruth Donnelly, 61 years old, with kind eyes and a nervous habit of looking over her shoulder. She had worked for Scott for 10 years, almost as long as Ridgeline Properties had existed. But Layla barely noticed Ruth that day, because of what she saw through Scott's office door. There she was, Leah Thompson, 27 years old, blonde highlights that probably cost more than Layla's monthly grocery budget, designer clothes draped over Scott's desk like a human decoration. She was laughing at something Scott said, touching his arm in that way women touch men they're sleeping with. The casual intimacy of it, the comfort. This wasn't new, this was routine. And when she saw Layla standing in the doorway, she smiled. Not embarrassed, not apologetic, not even surprised. Smug.
She looked at Layla like she was already yesterday's news, like Layla was a minor inconvenience that would soon be resolved, like she had already won something Layla didn't even know she was losing, and she was the shiny new tomorrow. The affair had been going on for 2 years, 2 years of lies, 2 years of business trips that weren't business trips, 2 years of late nights at the office that were very much not about work, 2 years of building a whole separate life while Layla was home taking care of his daughter, managing his household, supporting his career. 2 years of Layla making excuses for him, telling Jennifer that Daddy was working hard to give them a good life, defending him to friends who wondered why he missed every school event. 2 years of believing the man she married still existed somewhere underneath the distance and the silence. He didn't. Maybe he never had. What happened next would change everything. She went home and made the mistake of checking social media. Leah's Instagram was a monument to Scott's betrayal. Photos from Paris, the Eiffel Tower sparkling at night, champagne on a balcony, romantic dinners at restaurants Scott always told Layla were too expensive, beach vacations in the Maldives and Bora Bora, places they never visited as a family because there was always some reason they couldn't go. Caption after caption about living her best life. #blessed, #grateful, #lucky girl. 2 years of posts, 2 years of evidence, right there for anyone to see. Layla was grateful too, grateful she hadn't eaten dinner yet because she definitely would have lost it. Then came Susan's contribution to her public humiliation. Scott's mother posted a long message on social media about how happy she was that her son had finally gotten rid of the gold digger who had trapped him.
She wrote about how Scott deserved better than a woman who couldn't even produce a healthy grandchild. Defective genes, she wrote. She actually typed those words where everyone could see them, posted them publicly, proudly, like she was announcing a victory. The settlement offer arrived by certified mail.
John Spencer's letterhead was very impressive. Heavy paper, embossed logo, probably cost a fortune just to print. Scott was being so generous, the letter explained, so reasonable, so thoughtful about the practical realities of their situation. He would let Layla keep her personal clothing and her car, which was titled in her name anyway. How kind of him to let her keep things that were already legally hers. Everything else went to him. The house, all investments, retirement accounts, the furniture, the art they'd bought together, the life they'd built. She would receive minimum child support based on his reported income, which she already suspected was much lower than his actual income. Forensic accountants develop instincts about these things. 30 days to accept this offer or face the full force of his legal team in court. The threat was clear. He had John Spencer, she had nothing. Layla sat at her kitchen table in that cramped rental apartment, listening to Jennifer cough in the next room, and something unexpected happened. Not despair, not fear. Clarity. Scott had forgotten something important about her. He remembered the wife who made his dinner and raised his child and smiled at his mother's insults. He remembered the woman who gave up her career and her independence and her professional identity to support his dreams. He forgot the woman who used to tear apart fraudulent financial statements for a living. He forgot that before she was Layla Rice, the homemaker, she was Layla Harrison, forensic accountant, the woman who testified in federal court, the woman who uncovered schemes that executives thought were bulletproof, and she was very, very good at her job. She pulled out that crumpled bank statement from her purse. The numbers still didn't add up, and now she was going to find out why. Scott's lawyer filed a motion for full custody of Jennifer. The reasoning made Layla want to scream. Scott claimed she was financially unstable, that she couldn't provide proper care for a child with medical needs, that Jennifer deserved a stable home environment that only her father could provide, that he was deeply concerned, so deeply concerned about his daughter's welfare in her mother's care. The man who removed his own daughter from health insurance, who called her stinky and sick, who hadn't attended a single doctor's appointment in 3 years, who couldn't name her medications,
who didn't know her teacher's name or her best friend or what she wanted to be when she grew up. He wanted full custody. He didn't want to be a father. He never really had been one. He wanted a weapon. He knew that threatening to take her daughter would hurt Layla more than anything else, more than losing the house, more than losing the money, more than any humiliation he could devise. Jennifer was a chess piece to him, a way to force her to surrender. But she wasn't surrendering, not anymore. The thing about forensic accounting training is that it doesn't disappear. It just waits, like a computer in sleep mode, ready to wake up when you need it. Layla started spreading documents across her kitchen table every night after Jennifer went to bed. Bank statements, tax returns, credit card bills, anything she could legally obtain through divorce discovery, plus the records she had kept over the years, because accountants are natural hoarders of paperwork. Her grandmother used to say that numbers don't lie, but people use numbers to lie all the time. Finding the lies was Layla's specialty, and Scott had been lying for a very long time. Meanwhile, she played her role perfectly. When Spencer's intimidating letters arrived, she responded with meek requests for more time. When she had to appear at preliminary hearings, she seemed confused by legal procedures, overwhelmed, defeated. She asked the judge to repeat things. She got flustered by simple questions. She looked exactly what Scott wanted everyone to believe she was, a helpless housewife who didn't understand big, complicated legal things. Scott called her one evening to gloat about his inevitable victory. She should just accept his generous offer, he said, save herself the embarrassment of losing in court. Think about what was best for Jennifer, he said, as if he had ever thought about what was best for Jennifer.
Her voice trembled when she answered. She told him she was thinking about it. He laughed, actually laughed, and then he said that was the smartest thing she'd done in years. He hung up without saying goodbye. He didn't need to. He had already won. He had no idea that while he was celebrating his inevitable victory, she was building a case that would end his career. She called her old college roommate at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night.
Patricia Holloway had studied forensic accounting with Layla. They'd pulled all-nighters before exams together, survived Professor Morrison's legendary final together, dreamed about catching corporate criminals together while drinking cheap wine in their dorm room. Patricia stayed in the field and built a successful practice in Boston. Her firm specialized in exactly the kind of financial forensics that Layla needed. When Layla explained her situation, Patricia didn't hesitate. Analyzing her husband's shady finances sounded like her idea of a perfect Friday night, she said. She cleared her weekend schedule. She was absolutely in. Patricia came over with wine, take-out Chinese food, and a legal pad. They spread everything out on the living room floor like a financial crime scene. Bank statements in one pile, tax returns in another, credit card bills sorted by date, business records arranged chronologically. Within 2 hours, Patricia was pointing at numbers and making that face she used to make in college when she found something juicy, that little smile that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. She told Layla that her husband was either terrible at math or hiding a lot of money. Layla told her Scott was actually excellent at math. Patricia smiled. Then they were going to have some fun. The first discovery came after 3 nights of digging. Hid in accounts. Scott had opened investment portfolios at a different bank than their regular one, accounts that were never disclosed on their joint financial statements, accounts Layla had no idea existed. The total in those accounts was over $200,000, money he had been siphoning from his business income for years, claiming it went to expenses and taxes, money that should have been marital property, money that would have paid for Jennifer's medical care without Layla lying awake at night wondering how she would afford prescriptions. But the house was the real revelation. The house Scott kept calling his house, the one he was so eager to keep in the divorce, the one he had told her to get out of like she was a stranger. Layla remembered when they bought it. She was 7 months pregnant and having complications. The doctor had put her on bed rest. Scott said he would handle all the closing paperwork. He brought her documents to sign while she lay on the couch, swollen and exhausted, and grateful that he was taking care of things. She signed where he told her to sign. She trusted her husband completely. Her grandmother had passed away in their first year of marriage, left her $200,000. It was the most money Layla had ever had, and she wanted to use it to build something meaningful. They put $160,000 on the house. Her money, her inheritance, her grandmother's legacy. She had the bank transfer records. She had the closing statement showing that exact amount as the down payment. But when she finally looked at the deed, really looked at it, her name wasn't there. Scott had put only his name on the title. He had taken her grandmother's money, used it to buy a house, and then made sure she had no legal ownership of it. He had been planning this for years, maybe from the beginning. She called Patricia at midnight to tell her. Patricia asked if she had proof of the payment. Layla told her she had bank records, the original wire transfer, and closing documents showing the exact amount. Patricia said Scott was either incredibly arrogant or incredibly stupid, possibly both, and they were going to bury him. But they found more, so much more. A shadow company registered in Delaware called Ridgepoint Holdings, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, a pattern of transactions that looked exactly like textbook embezzlement. Scott wasn't just hiding money from his wife, he was hiding money from his own business partners. He was committing fraud on a scale that went way beyond divorce court. The total wasn't $200,000 anymore. When they finished counting, it was over $580,000. Her husband wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal. Then Ruth came forward. Ruth Donnelly, the quiet secretary with the kind eyes who had helped Layla gather documents that day at Scott's office.
She called one evening, voice barely above a whisper, and asked if they could meet somewhere private, somewhere nobody would see them. They sat in a coffee shop in Bridgeport where nobody would recognize them, a small place with bad lighting and excellent anonymity. And Ruth told her everything. She had worked for Scott for 10 years, almost as long as Ridgeline Properties had existed. She watched him build his business from nothing, watched him charm investors, watched him close deals that seemed impossible. She also watched him slowly transform into someone she didn't recognize. She had seen the fraudulent invoices, processed the suspicious wire transfers, filed the paperwork for the shell company in Delaware. She knew where every dollar went, every dollar that wasn't supposed to exist.
For years, she told herself it wasn't her business. She needed the job. She was a single woman approaching retirement with no safety net. What was she supposed to do? But 5 years ago, Ruth's daughter went through a divorce, a terrible one. Her daughter's husband was wealthy and connected, and he took everything. The house, the savings, the kids for 6 months, almost her sanity. Ruth watched her own child suffer while a powerful man used the legal system as a weapon, and something changed in her. When Ruth saw Scott filing for divorce, saw how he talked about Layla and Jennifer, saw the way he smiled when he described his victory, something broke inside her, or maybe something finally healed. She had been keeping copies of documents for years, just in case, she told herself, just in case someone ever needed them, just in case justice ever became possible. She handed Layla a folder that was 3 inches thick. It was everything. Records Scott thought had been deleted, emails he assumed were gone forever, the complete paper trail of his fraud, organized chronologically and cross-referenced by transaction. Ruth had been a secretary for 30 years. Apparently, secretaries know where all the bodies are buried. Layla asked Ruth if she understood what would happen when this came out. She would lose her job. Scott would probably try to sue her. Her retirement plans would be complicated at best. Ruth smiled. She said she was 62 years old and tired of being complicit in hurting good people. Some things matter more than a pension. Besides, she added, she had already applied for a job at her cousin's accounting firm in Hartford. They were expecting her to start in a couple of months. Patricia found the lawyer. Her name was Camille Ortega. She worked out of a small office above a bakery in downtown Stamford. No fancy reception area, no intimidating artwork, no leather furniture or mahogany desks. Just a desk covered with case files and a woman who looked at Layla like she already knew she was going to win. Camille had been practicing family law for 24 years. She had seen everything, done everything, won cases that looked unwinnable. And she had beaten John Spencer twice. He still pretended to not remember her name at bar association events. She found that absolutely delightful. Layla couldn't afford her normal rates. She was honest about that from the start.
But Camille looked through the evidence Layla and Patricia had compiled. Her eyebrows went up higher and higher with each page. By the end, she was actually laughing, the kind of laugh that meant someone's life was about to get very complicated. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. She would take the case on partial contingency, she said, a small retainer now and a percentage of whatever they won, because they were absolutely going to win. She called Scott's case a house of cards built on quicksand during an earthquake. They prepared 3 copies of the complete evidence file, one for the court, one that would be anonymously delivered to the IRS because Layla was a good citizen who believed in paying taxes, and one that would arrive at the offices of Scott's business partners 2 days before the final hearing. They deserved to know who they were working with. The hearing was scheduled 8 weeks after Scott filed for divorce, expedited because of the child custody issues and Camille's emergency motion regarding fraud in Scott's financial declarations. The judge assigned to their case was Eleanor Fitzgerald, known for having zero tolerance for lying in her courtroom. Things were coming together. Scott called Layla 2 days before the hearing. He sounded relaxed, happy even, the kind of happy that comes from absolute certainty. He said he was looking forward to finally putting this behind them. He mentioned that he and Leah were planning a trip to celebrate after his victory. The Maldives, very romantic, very expensive. He'd already booked the villa.
He suggested she use her settlement money wisely, since it would be the last help she ever got from him. She said she appreciated the advice, wished him safe travels. She hung up the phone and laughed until she cried. He had no idea at all. The courtroom was smaller than expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the faint smell of old paper and anxiety. Nothing like the dramatic courtrooms on television, just a functional room where people's lives got decided. Layla had dressed carefully that morning, professional but not flashy, the kind of outfit that said responsible mother, not gold digger. Camille had coached her on this. Appearances matter, especially in family court. Scott arrived with John Spencer like they were walking into a victory party. Expensive suits, confident smiles, the easy body language of men who had never lost anything important.
Spencer carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Lila's monthly rent. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, every detail perfect, every detail expensive. Scott winked at her across the courtroom, actually winked, like this was all a fun game he had already won. Susan sat in the front row of the gallery wearing a dress that screamed wealth and superiority. She had a small notebook in her lap, probably planning to write down every humiliating detail of Lila's defeat to share with her friends later. Leah Thompson was there too, a few rows back, checking her phone and looking bored. She was wearing a new bracelet Layla didn't recognize, probably a gift from Scott, probably paid for with money that should have been marital property. Layla wondered if she had started packing for the Maldives yet. And there, in the back of the gallery, sat three men Layla recognized from company events. Scott's business partners, Gregory Matheson, Dennis Cole, Warren Park, the men who had trusted Scott with their money and their reputation. They had received their evidence packages 2 days ago. They had not told Scott they were coming. Their faces were completely unreadable, which was somehow more terrifying than open anger. If you're still here with us, thank you for listening to this story. If it's touching your heart, please take a second to hit that like button and maybe share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your support keeps us going. Now, let's continue. Judge Fitzgerald entered and everyone rose. She had gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked like a librarian who had seen too much nonsense in her life and had no patience left for any more. Spencer presented Scott's case first. He painted a picture of a successful businessman burdened by an unstable wife who had contributed nothing to their marriage. He talked about Scott's generous settlement offer. He expressed concern for poor Jennifer, who clearly needed a stable home environment that only her father could provide. He used words like erratic, financially irresponsible, pattern of concerning behavior, potential substance issues. He never quite accused Layla of anything directly. He just implied, suggested, planted seeds. It was a masterful performance. Complete fiction, but masterful. Then it was Camille's turn. She started small. Simple questions about the marriage, the home, the finances. Her voice was calm, pleasant, almost casual. Scott answered confidently. Yes, the house was purchased during their marriage. Yes, it was titled in his name only. No, his wife had not contributed to the purchase. She was not employed at the time. Camille nodded thoughtfully, like she was just getting her facts straight, like this was all very routine. Then she introduced Exhibit A, the bank records showing a wire transfer of $160,000 from Layla's personal account to the closing company 8 years ago, the amount exactly matching the down payment on the house, the date exactly matching the closing date, the memo line reading "House Down Payment" in Layla's own handwriting. Scott's smile flickered, just for a moment, just enough to notice. Spencer leaned over to whisper something. The judge's eyebrows rose. Camille introduced Exhibit B, documentation of Layla's grandmother's estate, showing the inheritance she received, the source of those funds, traced clearly from her grandmother's accounts to hers to the house purchase, a house that Scott claimed she had not contributed to. Judge Fitzgerald asked Scott directly if he had any explanation. He stammered something about joint finances and marital contributions being complicated. His voice wasn't as confident anymore. She did not look convinced. Then came the hidden accounts, Exhibit C through Exhibit J. investment portfolios totaling over $580,000, accounts opened solely in Scott's name at banks Layla had never heard of, deposits that matched exactly with discrepancies in his reported business income, money that should have been disclosed as marital assets, money that had been hidden from her and from this court. Spencer's face changed. The confident lawyer mask slipped, revealing something like panic underneath. This wasn't in his briefing materials. This wasn't supposed to happen. He objected repeatedly. Relevance, foundation, hearsay. The judge overruled him repeatedly. This was a divorce proceeding. Financial disclosure was mandatory, and these documents were very, very relevant. Scott was no longer smiling. He was staring at the documents like they might burst into flames if he concentrated hard enough.
Camille introduced the shell company records, the offshore accounts, the pattern of transactions that spelled fraud in letters a mile high. She explained calmly that these documents had also been provided to Mr. Rice's business partners who were present in the courtroom today. She added that the information may also be of significant interest to certain federal agencies. Scott turned around and saw his partners for the first time. The color drained from his face. Gregory Matheson, who had always been friendly to Layla at holiday parties, just shook his head slowly. The disappointment in his eyes was devastating. Spencer asked for a recess. His hands were actually trembling. The legendary lawyer who never lost, who charged $500 just to think about your case, coming apart at the seams. Judge Fitzgerald denied the recess. She wanted to see where this was going. Camille introduced the evidence of Scott's affair. The car he bought for Leah Thompson, $67,000. The apartment he rented for their meetings, $3,200 a month. The jewelry, including a $4,500 necklace that Layla remembered seeing on a credit card statement and asking about. Scott told her it was a client gift, a thank you for a big deal, nothing to worry about. The receipts for all of this were in his business expense records, which he had claimed as tax deductions. So he wasn't just cheating on his wife, he was cheating on the IRS too. They tend to frown on that sort of thing. Layla glanced at Leah. She was no longer looking at her phone, she was looking at the exit, survival instinct finally kicking in. She slipped out of the courtroom quietly, probably realizing that the Maldives trip was not going to happen and that being associated with Scott Rice was about to become very uncomfortable. Susan sat frozen in her seat, mouth hanging open slightly. The notebook lay forgotten in her lap. This was not the story she had planned to tell her friends. Scott tried to speak. He said this was all lies, all fabrications, that Layla had somehow manufactured evidence to destroy him, that this was the behavior of a mentally unstable woman, that the court should see this for what it was, a desperate attack by someone who couldn't accept reality. Judge Fitzgerald cut him off.
She said she had seen a lot of cases in her career. People lied to her all the time. It was practically a job requirement. But the audacity of lying this extensively, this brazenly, while committing fraud against a spouse, business partners, and the federal government simultaneously, that was genuinely impressive, and not in a good way. She looked at Scott the way you look at something unpleasant stuck to your shoe. Then she looked at Layla, and for just a moment there was something like respect in her eyes. Judge Fitzgerald's ruling was everything Layla had dreamed of, and more. Full custody of Jennifer. No visitation rights until Scott completed a parenting course and demonstrated stable living conditions. The house, which Layla had paid for with her grandmother's inheritance, transferred entirely to her name. 70% of all marital assets awarded to her due to Scott's fraud, hidden accounts, and perjury before the court. Full child support calculated on his actual income, not the fake numbers he had reported. The judge made a point of noting that she found his financial declarations to be intentionally misleading and potentially criminal. Medical expenses for Jennifer covered completely, and Scott was ordered to restore her health insurance immediately, retroactive to the day he had removed her. Every prescription, every doctor's visit, every hospitalization, he would pay for all of it. The man who said he wanted everything was about to lose everything. The man who told Layla to get out of his house was now legally required to get out of her house. The man who called his daughter stinky and sick would spend the next 10 years paying for her care, whether he liked it or not. But the court ruling was just the beginning of Scott's collapse. The federal investigation started within 3 weeks. Tax fraud is not something the IRS takes lightly, especially when it's documented this thoroughly. His assets were frozen pending investigation. His passport was flagged. His bank accounts became evidence. The Maldives would have to wait, possibly forever. His business partners filed their own lawsuit. Embezzlement from a partnership is a serious matter. Gregory and the others were not feeling forgiven. They wanted their money back, plus damages, plus interest, plus legal fees. They wanted him to suffer the way they had suffered when they discovered the betrayal.
Scott's lawyers, plural now because Spencer had mysteriously developed a scheduling conflict that prevented him from continuing representation, were billing hours they would probably never collect. His legal fees alone were projected to exceed $200,000, money he no longer had access to. Susan stopped posting on social media. Her friends had seen the court documents, which were public record. The gold digger story didn't hold up well when everyone could read about her son's hidden accounts and ongoing federal investigation. The woman who had measured windows for new curtains was now pretending she barely knew her son's ex-wife. Layla heard through mutual acquaintances that Susan had taken down all her posts about the divorce. She was telling people she had always had concerns about Scott's character. Some things never change. Leah Thompson disappeared from Scott's life approximately 45 minutes after the court ruling. The apartment he had rented for her was in his name, and with his assets frozen, rent was no longer being paid. The car was repossessed 2 weeks later. Layla didn't know where Leah went. She found she genuinely did not care. Leah was a symptom, not the disease. Scott had plenty of problems that had nothing to do with her. Ruth retired on schedule. She sent Layla a card congratulating her on her victory, with a pressed flower from her garden tucked inside. She wrote that her daughter had cried happy tears reading about the case, that sometimes justice really does win. Layla framed that card. It sits on her desk at her new job, because yes, she went back to work. It turns out that forensic accountants who can uncover massive fraud schemes are in high demand. Patricia recommended her to several firms. She had 3 job offers within a month. She chose the one with the best health insurance and the most flexible schedule for a single mom. Her skills had been sleeping for 6 years, but they woke up ready to work. Layla and Jennifer moved back into their house. Their house. Jennifer picked new colors for her bedroom, purple with silver stars, just like she always wanted. She adopted a cat from the shelter because Jennifer had always wanted one and Scott had always said no. She named him Biscuit. He sleeps at the foot of her bed every night. Her breathing is better now. Regular treatment, proper medication, a stable home where she feels safe and loved.
She still asks about her father sometimes. Layla tells her the truth in age-appropriate ways. He made some bad choices. He has to deal with the consequences. They're going to be okay. Last month, Layla ran into Scott at a grocery store. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, like the universe had deflated him. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by wrinkled khakis and a shirt that needed ironing. The Rolex was gone too, probably sold. His hair had grayed at the temples in a way that made him look older than his years. His shoulders hunched forward like he was trying to make himself invisible. He saw her and opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, maybe an apology, maybe an explanation, maybe a plea for forgiveness, maybe just more lies dressed up as remorse. But no words came out. His jaw worked, but nothing followed. Whatever speech he had rehearsed in his head died before it reached his lips. She walked past him without stopping, without acknowledging that she had seen him at all. She had nothing left to say to him, nothing left to feel for him. He was a stranger now, a cautionary tale she would tell Jennifer someday, when she was old enough to understand. Some people think being quiet means being weak. Some people confuse patience with surrender. And some people really should pay more attention to their wife's career history before trying to steal everything she has. Layla's grandmother used to tell her that the universe has a long memory and a good sense of timing. She didn't always believe her, but sitting in her kitchen now, watching Jennifer play with Biscuit in the backyard of the home she fought for, she thinks maybe her grandmother was right. Justice doesn't always come fast, but when it comes complete. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories. See you next time.